Rent keeps increasing without wages increasing. What happens when no one can afford it? Always see the comments about increases in rent and how large corporations are buying, renting, and rinse and repeat. Right now, a huge percentage of people are barely affording rent. So what happens when no one literally can afford it? A part of me says the cost has to decrease because of supply and demand, but then the other side, if me, says these companies aren't going to go broke overnight. They can manage. So realistically, will we ever get to that point that no one can afford? And if so, then what? We're already to the point where millions of people are starting to be classified as the working homeless. The French Revolution in 2023 tbh. Ruin enough people's lives with no hope of recovery, and you will eventually end up with an angry mob. And it's not days gone by where the mob had to grow enough locally to make a difference. Mobs can organize. We're approaching a war, and those in charge are desperately attempting to make it left versus right instead of 99 versus 1. But we slip closer to 99 versus 1 every day. Star Trek predicted that in 2024 there would be a massive wave of riots across the U.S. They call them the Bell Riots. They are the culmination of decades of civil unrest and inequality. The fallout from the riots sets the stage for the founding of the Federation. The bottom 20% will be forced into group of housing, also known as boarding homes, bed-sits, or rooming houses, where you rent a room and share a bathroom with like 5 to 10 people. That's what 1K rent will become. It'll be like 5 to 10 POP living in a house with no kitchen or laundry or shared spaces. Just tiny bedrooms and 1 or 2 bathrooms. Not to sound like Fox News, but Los Angeles right now can tell you what it looks like. People live in cars, in tents, getting harassed from street corner to street corner by cops. The city council sets up sheds, puts 2 beds in them, and runs mini jails with curfews in the name of providing housing. And some people are doing their best to help, but most are just trying to earn enough money to keep a roof over their head. We all gather around the campfire at the homeless camp. During the Great Depression, the American dollar went further than it does today. Why do you think there's such a homeless crisis? Plus we have new and stronger drugs to exacerbate it. We are worse off than 2008 and the Great Depression while acting like everything is fine. Corporations are currently looking to build planned cities. This is how they turn capitalism in slavery. They buy up all the housing. Then your salary goes right back into the corporation's pockets in the form of rent. Then you do all your shopping at the company store. And because you need to feed your family and eat, you put up with not owning anything and your entire existence going into padding the rich's pockets. In other words, eat the fucking rich is what happens when no one can afford to eat or pay rent. Unless they find a way to beat us down mentally. It's already happening. Homelessness exists. I'm working 7 days a week. May have to just start working around the clock. Woman shrugging, medium light skin tone. 3 income households. Nothing. Because people think of homelessness as a moral failing and not something that can happen to them. Don't assume the working class will rise up. They won't. They have the middle class to help prevent that in the form of law enforcement. What happens when rent goes up and the working class can't afford it? It means the middle class gets those apartments and the working class gets to live on the streets. Or in shelters. That's all. I think you're gonna see a lot more of 2-4 people to a bedroom in barracks dorm living. Just to afford a roof over your head. If people get over the lack of privacy and focused on collectively being able to pay the house bills, then have enough each extra to save some money, then there's a chance to do a bit more than survive. It's not a matter of lack of space like some countries. It's that profiteering and corporate investment income ownership of rental property is pricing out single income and even double income renters. U.S. taxpayers can't even get paid maternity leave, let alone federally mandated paid time off like literally every single other industrialized country. Even Ukraine and Russia. You think politicians who are all millionaires work 6 months out of the year are gonna do anything to improve our lives? The $900 billion defense budget and corporate bailouts are the priority. Not you, the labor unit. I absolutely believe we will move back towards a system where you have company towns. The next major perk for jobs to offer will be housing. Come work for us, and we will provide you one of our corporate apartments. We already see it in China. And we see it in tiny form with some tech companies offering nap pods or any meal you want, as well as Google offering their employees the ability to rent a hotel room on their campus for super cheap. It's coming. We will all be owned by the people we work for. What happens when no one can afford it? That's the problem. The working class is waiting to see what happens instead of actively trying to prevent things from getting to that point. Homelessness becomes a crime, already is in some places. Debtor's prison comes back. Prison labor is super cheap and the rich continue getting richer. USA officially becomes a second world country on its way to third world. Company towns probably as it was back in days. You have a place to live as long you work for the company that own the property and takes rent right out of your paycheck. The rest is paid out in company currency that can only be used in company-owned stores and shops. Basically how miners lived pre-WW1. We repeat history like the circle that it is. All the large corporations that actually own all the houses will file for bankruptcy. And you and I, the taxpayers, will bail them out with all the money we don't have. Then the GOP will blame poor people for not working hard enough. They lose their assets because they can't afford them either. Delicious rich meats will be back on the menu. It's already happening. All these major issues with homelessness that is plaguing major cities. Huge tent camps full of drug dens and bike chop shops. Those are all people who've been priced out of housing and, even despite working, can't afford to live. Everybody wants to get rid of the homeless. But those homeless people were your neighbors until they couldn't afford it anymore. Unless something drastic changes, it's only going to get worse. People are all like French Revolution here with thing happening. But the reality is much more. The capacity for human suffering going beyond what most understand. When you exist in a system and never doubt it, your capacity for suffering goes much further than it would otherwise. Consider now how many people already talk about skipping a meal. Then you'll the juggler at ACT. You'll live with other people and share costs or live on the streets. Enough people can afford it such that the majority won't riot. What can be done? Vote for politicians that expand social services as if your life depended on it. Which it might. Without a significant increase in class consciousness, fascist decay. But if we can continue the meager growth in class consciousness and union interest, maybe revolution. Or enough of a threat of revolution to cause capitalists to give scraps. Like with FDR. We keep cutting costs elsewhere. First leisure activities and entertainment. Then food. Then finding ways to cut other necessities. Then you become homeless. Or you migrate to a new country. Economists have stated that in the next decade, many Americans will begin migrating to more cost-friendly countries as a necessity. They're on pace to be correct. You'll see Republicans shift their stance to pro-immigration once this begins impacting corporations' bottom lines. Just refuse to move out when you are evicted. There aren't enough police to physically remove us all.